All right, so these types of places are in the big cities, and now they're kind of starting to pop up all over the place. Noodle houses and noodle bowls are just kind of like the in thing. And basically, it's think like Chinese food with broth in a bowl. I mean, that's not a very good way to describe it, but they're really fun, especially when it's cold outside, because it's like a big bowl of kicked up chicken noodle soup. And I'm going to show you how to do beef teriyaki noodle bowls at home. I think the kids are even going to love them because you can kind of slurp the noodles out of the bowl. Anyway, you'll get it. You'll see. And they're just kind of fun, something different. So I wanted to talk about a few different types of noodles that you can use for these. Now, ordinary linguine noodles or spaghetti noodles would work just fine. But boy, check out the Oriental aisle of your grocery store. I know Festivals keeps expanding and expanding, and there's all sorts of neat new stuff. So we actually found some great udon Japanese noodles. So we're going to give those a try, and they are real quick cook. They only take about 2 minutes. So I'm going to drop them into boiling water in just a minute or so. It's not quite boiling, and we don't want to overcook those. So anyway, check out all the different kinds of noodles out there, and I don't think I've ever met a kid that didn't like noodles. So basically this is noodles and steak and vegetables and a broth, and it's going to be yummy. So we'll get to the noodles in just a minute because I don't want to overcook those. Let's get to the steak. This is a teriyaki steak noodle bowl. You could also do this with chicken or pork. But the one thing I did is I threw this steak in the freezer for a little bit, and I want to slice the steak into really thin pieces. And if you freeze it just for maybe even a half hour or so, it's just going to be a little easier to slice. Now, what kind of steak are you using? Well, you can use beef tenderloin. Let's say you're doing a whole beef tenderloin and you've got the ends. You're going to trim up the ends. Those would be perfect to use for this. You could use, a New York strip steak. We're going to keep it budget friendly, and this is just a sirloin steak that we're going to use. So, a nice lean sirloin steak that look at that, nice and trim for us. So you want to trim the fat and just slice it into very thin strips. And just that little time in the freezer and a sharp knife really will do it for you. And this is a very quick cook. That's why we want our thin strips of steak. Also, we're going to be, kind of slurping this up in the bowl. So we want to be able to eat it pretty easy.
You can use flank steak too.
Flank steak would be great too. Yeah, good point there. Thank you, Anne, for that. Really, any kind of steak will work, as long as it's into thin strips. And this is a beautiful sirloin you picked up at Festivals. Perfect, exactly what we're looking for. And we don't need a whole ton of it either, because the star of the show is really the noodles and the broth. It's really fun to see these noodle houses make their way to the Midwest. It's something that when I was in Seattle, well, of course they have them in Chicago and in New York, and I was in Seattle, and they have a big international, area of town there with all sorts of different ethnic restaurants, and you'll see noodle houses all over the place. So I've got a big skillet or a wok. The biggest skillet you have is what we're looking for here, and I've got a few tablespoons of canola oil, and I want to heat that in the skillet. And this is kind of what I do to test it out, to make sure this is like you'd stir fry something. So you want a smoking hot pan. And if you're hearing that sizzle, we're good to go. So I'm just going to get those thin strips of steak in here. And you notice I'm kind of putting them around. I don't want them next to each other. I want to get a little color on them. Color is flavor. And they're going to cook up very, very quickly. And that's what we want. So this is something you could come home from work and throw this together. I kid you not, 5-10 minutes. Real quick cook. And if your kids like ramen noodles, and come on, what kids don't? They're going to love this. I'm going to get a clean cutting board because we've used this one with meat. And I'm just going to give this steak a little flip over so that we can get some color on both sides. Perfect. Looks great. Okay. All right, got some fresh garlic here that I'm just going to give a rough chop to. Now you know the rule when it comes to garlic. You got to get it in there and cook it very, very quickly. So that's what we're going to do. 30 seconds. Oh, beef and garlic, there's just nothing better than that. Smells amazing. Get it moving around. Maybe a little more oil. Thank you, Ann. You could just tell the pan needed some oil. And there we go. Okay. The minute you start smelling that garlic, you got to start adding some other stuff to the pan so it won't burn. I've got 4 cups of beef broth or stock. I happen to love using the stock, the stuff that comes in a box. I just think it's just better. It's about the same price these days. And now I want to bring this to a simmer. I also want to add your favorite teriyaki sauce, about 1/3 of a cup. So, boy, we were talking about that ethnic, part of the grocery store with all these different sauces. Boy, you could spend hours in there. I mean, it's just really fun to see all the new different stuff. So, several different brands of teriyaki sauce. Just go for your favorite. And I'm just going to eyeball it and add about 1/3 of a cup. And this is going to give it some great flavor. There we go. Okay, let's get to those noodles. I'm going to drop these udon noodles in here. And Ann's going to remind me. Now there's a flavor packet in here, just like there would be ramen noodles, but we're not going to use that because we've got all this great flavor already in the dish. Yeah, these are a real quick cook. They take about 1 to 2 minutes into our water, and they're really fun. And depending on how many people you feed, you might want to use a couple packets of this. So we're going to get those in there. And they're going to cook very quickly. Now I'm just going to add some vegetables. This is one of those things where it just depends what your family's into. What do they like? My husband Bob loves broccoli. So try and get a little broccoli in here. This is one of those where it's just like a stir fry. Fresh vegetables are best, but check out that produce drawer in your refrigerator and see what it needs using up. Carrots, celery. I love to put a little bit of red pepper. Red pepper is so good for you, full of vitamins, and it's so pretty too, and it's going to look pretty in this dish. So just some thinly sliced red pepper strips in there. Noodles doing over there, Ann? They just kind of need to be brought back to life. They're that quick of a cook. And you just want to let this simmer. It's supposed to be brothy. It's not like a stir fry. So these are noodle bowls. You want to have them in a bowl, serve them in a bowl, and kind of slurp them, and that's kind of the fun part about it. I am got a couple scallions that we could garnish the top with, and those noodles are just about done. So, and this is kind of fun to slice them on the bias or on an angle, give it kind of that more Asian feel. Okay, let's check out these noodles. I'm just going to drain them in the colander, quick. And get them back into our simmering broth. And there you go. And this is just a method, you know. We used beef. You could use strips of chicken or little chunks of chicken. You can do shrimp. You can keep this vegetarian. So just want to kind of give you the idea of how this all goes. So then how you serve this is, and you can see this is pretty healthy. Didn't do a lot of naughty stuff in here, just a little bit of oil to brown that beef, and you could certainly cut back on that too. So into a big bowl, and then you want to make sure you've got plenty of broth. So there you go, it's a teriyaki beef noodle bowl. I think your family's really gonna love this. You wanted, you know, and I'm always looking for new, different recipes. Well, here's one. Totally different, but really yummy. Maybe a few little scallions on the top. And let the slurping begin. Recipes on our website. You can also pick it up at any area Festival Foods. Teriyaki beef noodle bowls, something different for dinner tonight.